I am the Necromancer, master of dark arts. Hear my voice and fear my words, for vile spirits obey my commands.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Dark Santos. Today we're going to be going over the 1-bar Corpse Buster Necro. With update 43, the Necromancer has received a lot of significant changes, which has buffed up the Necromancer and made it very fun to play with, especially with 1-bar builds, and this specific build blows it out of the water. This specific build focuses on striking a perfect balance between DPS and survivability. Now, this build is designed to keep you in the fight while dishing out massive explosive damage, making it ideal for PvE content. This is one of the most unique stamina Necromancers out there. It's incredibly easy to play with, requiring only one skill bar, no bar swapping, and no trial set. I'm gonna go over everything you need to make this build work, including skills, gear, champion points, and so much more. So stay tuned because that's up next. What's up, everybody? So here we are checking out the new Necromancer build with update 43. The Necromancer has gotten a lot of buffs as well as a new class set called the Corpse Buster. So this is the Corpse Buster Stamina Necro, which has been one of my favorite builds to play with, especially with the Necromancer. I feel like the Necromancer hasn't really gotten a lot of love in the past. This build just makes it very fun and easy to play with, and you're going to be dealing a lot of explosive damages. On top of that, it has a lot of sustainability. So let's dive into it. Now let's start off with our stats here, because for our stats we actually have 19,250 for Magicka. For health we actually have 25,527. On stamina we have 31,028. Our magic of recovery is pretty low at 791. Our health recovery is at 1499. And our stamina recovery is at 780, but that's going to significantly go up as soon as we activate one of our skills, which you're going to see later on. Now our spell damage is at 4609, our spell critical is at 42.5, our spell penetration is at 7,732, and then we have spell resistance of 21,450, and physical resistance of 18,546. Our critical resistance at 1320, and since this is a stamina build, all of our attributes are going to go into stamina. As for our consumables, we actually have Bewitched Sugar Skulls, which increase our max health by 3,937, our stamina and magicka by 3,622, and our health recovery by 393. Now, as for active effects, everything that you see on screen comes from one specific item, and that's the Oaken Soul Ring. It gives us Empower, Minor Courage, Major Resolve, Minor Fortitude, Minor Intellect, Minor Endurance, Major Prophecy, Major Savagery, Minor Protection, Minor Berserk, Sorcery, Minor Force, Major Brutality, Minor Heroism, Minor Mending, and then for the Major Gallop we actually have that from the Assault skill line, but our Mundus Stone is the Thief, which increases our weapon and spell critical strike. And just like almost every other 1-bar build out there, we can't go wrong with the Lightning Staff of the Sergeant. We actually have an Absorb Stamina enchantment, which deals 2,394 physical damage and restores 354 stamina. This is going to make up for the lack of stamina recovery that we actually have, as well as with the Sharpened trait. This is actually going to increase our physical and spell penetration by 3,276. And now the beauty about the Sergeant that it gives us maximum health, gives us as well health recovery, and it adds 129 weapon and spell damage. And whenever we actually deal a heavy attack, you gain a stack of the Sergeant focus for 5 seconds, which increases your damage basically by 645 per stack, and this effect can happen every second and it stacks up to 4 times. So that's going to increase our weapon and spell damage every single time we go ahead and make a heavy attack with this lightning staff. So that's the reason why we have the Sergeant's gear. Now at the core of this particular build we have the Corpse Buster set. This is a Necromancer only class set, which means only Necromancers can wear this particular set, which makes it very unique. I haven't seen a lot of builds out there that are using this particular set. Now, me personally, I love this set because it gives us a lot of weapon and spell damage by wearing 3 pieces. And then by wearing 4 pieces, you get 657 critical chance. But the beauty about it is wearing the 5th piece, which by wearing 5 pieces of the Corpse's Buster, consuming a corpse causes a corpse to explode, dealing 8,156 magic damage to enemies within 5 meters, and increasing the damage by 10% for each Grave Lord ability slotted. This effect can occur once every 0.5 seconds and scales off the higher your weapon and spell damage. Enemies damaged with the explosion gain minor breach for 5 seconds, reducing their physical and spell resistance by 2,974. Now, given the fact that you can actually activate this every 0.5 seconds, you can see how you can basically spam this whenever you have tons of corpse in the floor, allowing you to cause massive damage while you're in the battlefield. As for a chest, we actually have the Curse of the Sergeant, so everything on this is actually going to be maximum stamina enchantment and reinforced traits. As for a shoulder piece, we have the Slime Craw monster set, which we have it with Divine Trait, maximum stamina enchantment, and the reason why we have this is because it gives us 771 critical chance by just wearing 1 piece. As for our waist, we actually have the Corpse Buster Sash, which this is the light version, and we have it with Divine Trait and again maximum stamina. The same goes for our hands. We actually have the Corpse Busters as well, the light version with Divine Trait, maximum stamina. But the only thing that's going to change is the legs. For the legs, we actually have the Corpse Busters, but medium. And that's the beauty about this particular set, that they actually come in different varieties. You can have a heavy set, a medium set, or a light piece. So it's sort of like a crafted set. As you can see, we have a light feet, which again, everything's maximum stamina and Divine Traits. Now, moving into jewelry, we actually have the Necklace of the Sergeant. We actually have it with a multi-effect enchantment, which gives us 174 weapon and spell damage, and again adds 10 stamina recovery, and with the Bloodthirsty trait, which increases your weapon and spell damage against enemies under 90% health by 350. So this will go the same for basically all of our jewelry. This will also apply to our rings, which is the Ring of the Sergeant, and our mythical item, which is the Oaken Soul Ring. Now, the Oaken Soul Ring is going to give us all those active effects that we saw at the beginning of the video, which by having this equipped, you're actually able to swap between your primary and backup weapon sets, and you gain minor berserk, minor courage, major brutality, major sorcery, major prophecy, major savagery, minor force, minor protection, minor resolve, minor mending, minor fortitude, minor intellect, minor endurance, minor heroism, minor slayer, minor aegis, and empower. Now let's talk about our skills, because for our skills, the first skill that we actually have slotted is Unrevering Boneyard, which this is actually a morph to Boneyard, which when we activate it, it desecrates the ground in the target location, dealing 14,212 frost damage over 10 seconds to enemies inside, and applying major breach and minor vulnerability, reducing physical and spell resistance by 5,948 and increasing damage taken by 5% for 4.1 seconds each tick. Now, if you cast this on top of a corpse, you're going to be able to deal 30% more damage, and if you're doing any sort of group content, any ally in the area can activate the Grave Robber's synergy, dealing 10,506 additional frost damage to nearby enemies and healing for damage done. Now, in addition to this, we also have the Corpse Buster damage. For every single time we consume a corpse, it will cause an explosion. For our second skill, we actually have Skeletal Archer. Now, this is actually a morph to Skeletal Mage. Now, this is one of the moves that actually has been buffed with the new update 43. So every single time we summon a Skeletal Mage, it will fight for us for 20 seconds while granting you major brutality, sorcery, increasing your weapon and spell damage by 20%, and attacking the closest enemy every 2 seconds, dealing 2,170 physical damage. And each time the archer deals damage, it also deals 15% more damage than the previous attacks. On top of that, once the 20 seconds are over, the archer is going to disappear and leave a corpse in the floor, which we're later on going to be able to take advantage of this. Remember, the more corpses we have on the floor, the better it is going to be for us, because we're going to be able to blow stuff up from left to right. As for our next skill, we actually have Detonating Siphon, which is a morph to Shocking Siphon. Now this is going to violently drain the last spark of life from a corpse, dealing 27,510 disease damage over 20 seconds to all enemies around the corpse and between you and the corpse. You also gain major savagery and prophecy for 20 seconds, increasing your weapon and spell to critical rating by 2,629. On top of this, when the siphon ends, the corpse explodes, dealing an additional 8,407 disease damage to all enemy nearby. And while slotted, your damage then is also increased by 3%. Now for our next ability, we have Blighted Blast Bows, and this is going to be one of the most important skills that we need, because if you don't have a corpse in the area, this is what's going to help you launch a skeleton towards an enemy and it will explode. Now, once it explodes, it will leave a corpse in the floor, which you can take advantage of by siphoning with it or using boneyards. Now, this again, it's going to be able to cause massive damage. It's a stamina technique, and it will deal 16,816 disease damage to all enemies nearby, applying the disease status effect and major defile to them for 4 seconds, meaning it's going to reduce their healing received and damaging their shields by 12%. Now the next skill that we have is Ruinous Scythe, which is also a morph to Death Scythe. Now again, this will slice into your enemy's life force, dealing 8,407 bleed damage while applying the Emerald status effect and setting them off balance for 7 seconds. This is going to work great for our heavy attacks because we're going to be able to make more damage when an enemy's off balance and knocking them down. On top of that, you're also going to heal 4,212 health for the first enemy hit, and an additional 1404 for each additional enemy up to 5 times. The healing of this ability scales off your max health, but I would try not to spam this because it does take 2,644 stamina, and again, we are dealing with a stamina character that doesn't have a stamina weapon or a lot of stamina recovery for that matter. And I know it's pretty ironic that I'm using a lightning staff on a stamina character, but I tested out the stamina based weapons and they don't compare to the damage that we make with the lightning staff. So moving on now to our ultimate, we actually have Pestilent Colossus, which is a morph to Frozen Colossus, and it unleashes a Pestilent Flesh Colossus that pulverizes enemy in the area. This Colossus smashes to the ground 3 times over 3 seconds, dealing 14,949, 15,695, and 16,480 disease damage with the first, second, and third smash. Dealing damage applies with disease status effect and major vulnerability to any enemy hit for 12 seconds, increasing their damage taken by 10%. So you can see why we're actually using this morph, because we're going to be dealing damage on top of damage on top of damage. Now this is going to be able to include as well as consuming corpses. Once these corpses are on the floor, if you're taking out multitudes of enemies, this is going to be easy for us to be able to have lots of corpses in the ground. So I definitely recommend you go with this particular morph instead of the other morph that we have with Frozen Colossus. Now moving on to our passives, Grave Lords, we actually have reusable parts, meaning every single time our mages dies, our next mage summoning is going to cost us 15% less. Then we have Death Kneel. This will increase your critical strike chance against enemies under 25% by 10% for each Grave Lord ability slotted, which we have a whopping 50% increase. And then we actually have Dismember, which while a Grave Lord ability is active, your spell and physical penetration are increased by 1,500. Then we have Rapid Rot 2, which increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 10%. Now let's move on to our Bone Tyrant passes. We have Death Cleaning, which whenever an enemy you are in combat with dies within 20 meters of you, it restores 666 magicka and stamina. This is actually going to make up for the lack of stamina recovery that we have for our character. Our next passive is Disdain Harm, which reduces the damage you take from damage over time abilities by 15% while you have a Bone Tyrant ability active. Another passive is Health Avarice, which increases your healing received by 2% for each Bone Tyrant ability slotted, which as you can see we actually have a 2% bonus since we only have one slotted. And for our last passive for Bone Tyrant, we have Last Grasp, which increases your maximum health by 1,250. Now let's talk about Living Death, because Living Death has some abilities that are going to be useful for us. One of this being Spirit Guardian and Mortal Coil. Now these two, I recommend you slot and replace Boneyard with either one of these if you're doing solo content. As you can see, Spirit Guardian conjures a ghostly spirit to your bidding, lasting 16 seconds and restoring 2,795 health every 2 seconds, either to you or a friend if you're doing group content, whoever has the lowest health. And as well as, while active, 10% of the damage you take is transferred to the spirit instead, and once it runs out, it creates a corpse which you can later on use to siphon and consume. Now, personally, if you're going to use some heals, I recommend Mortal Coil, because you can siphon the last remnants of a life from a corpse, healing for 21,636 health over 12 seconds to yourself and all allies between you and the corpse. On top of that, you're consuming this corpse, meaning that it will explode. It will take advantage of the Corpse Buster set. You also restored 170 magicka and stamina as well by just having this equipped every 2 seconds, so your stamina recovery is going to go up while you're siphoning with a corpse. As for the passive, we have Curative Course. While you have a negative effect on you, your healing is increased by 8%. Near Death Experience, while you have a Living Death ability slotted, your critical strike chance with all healing abilities is increased up to 20%. And then we also have Corpse Consumption, which if you consume a corpse, you generate 10 ultimate, and this effect can occur once every 16 seconds. Now, the last passive that we have for Living Death is Undead Confederate, which if we have a Sacrificial Bone, Skeleton Mage, or Spirit Mender active, your health, magicka, and stamina recovery is increased by 200. Now, we also have all the passives for Destruction Staff. That's definitely a must, as we are using the Lightning Destruction Staff. We have all the passives as well for Light Armor. The reason why is because it's going to decrease our roll dodging, our cost of sprint, and as well as gives us a lot of weapon and spell penetration and spell resistance for each piece of light armor that we have equipped. Now, I also recommend getting as well some passives for your medium armor, right? Get every single passive you have out there, because it's going to increase our weapon and spell damage by 2% for every piece that we have on. Athletics, which is going to reduce the cost of roll dodge, and as well as your heavy armor, which is going to increase our physical and spell resistance for each piece that we have on. We're also getting physical and spell resistance, health recovery by 4% for each piece of heavy armor we have equipped. On top of that, you restore 108 magicka and stamina whenever you take direct damage to yourself, as well as it increases our maximum health by 2% for every piece of heavy armor we have equipped, and it increases the magicka and stamina your heavy attack restores, and it increases your healing received by 1% for each piece of heavy armor worn. Now, for our last passes, I recommend you get the Undaunted Command, which activating a synergy restores 4% of your max health, stamina, and magicka whenever you're doing group content, and as well as Undaunted Metal. Now, Undaunted Metal increases your max health and stamina and magicka by 2% for each type of armor you have on. So if you have a heavy, medium, and light, you're going to be able to get 2% per each. That's why we have 6%, since we have all three equipped on our character. Now, as for class, we are a Dark Elf, so I recommend getting all the passes for the Dark Elves, which is going to give us flame resistance. It's going to help us with getting more stamina, and then on top of that, it increases your weapon and spell damage by 250. Now, let's talk about our champion points. So for Warfare, we have Fighting Finesse, which increases your critical damage and critical healing done by 4% per stage. We actually have a whopping 8% critical damage and critical healing done. Then we also have Master at Arms, which increases your damage done with direct damage attacks by 3% per stage. And we also have Weapons Expert, which increases your damage done by light and heavy attacks by 4% per stage. And last but not least, Wrathful Strikes, which gives us a 41 weapon and spell damage to your damaging abilities per stage. We actually have a 205 weapon and spell damage in total with Wrathful Strikes. Now, for our fitness, we actually have Bloody Renewal, which restores 300 stamina per stage whenever you kill an enemy. This is going to help out since we lack stamina recovery. And then we also have Strategic Reserve, which we get 30 health recovery for every 10 ultimate you have, which ultimately will help us with our survivability. I also recommend getting Rejuvenation, which grants us 1.8 health, magicka, and stamina recovery per stage, which gives us a total of 90 health, magicka, and stamina recovery. And last but not least, Fortify, which grants us 34.6 armor per stage, which we get a total of 1,731 of armor. So this is actually going to be able to help us with survivability, with sustainability, which is perfect for solo content. And as for our craft, we actually have Rationer, which adds 10 minutes to the duration of any food or drink that we consume. Liquid Efficiency, so whenever we use a potion or potions, you have a 10% chance to not consume. And Steed's Blessing, which increases your out of combat movement speed by 4.4% per stage, which we get a total of 20% movement speed. Now let's talk about our playstyle, so our parsing. First thing we're going to do is we're going to summon the Archer. Once we summon the Archer, we're actually going to use Blight Bones. So Blight Bones is so we can have our first corpse on the ground. So this is our first attack. It's going to ran through the enemy, explode. Once explode, we activate Siphon. Once we do the Siphon, we do a heavy attack. Then we summon Boneyards. Once we summon Boneyards, we do another heavy attack. Then we're going to summon Blast Bones again. Then we do the Sight to get enemy off balance. A heavy attack. Blast Bones is going to explode. We're going to do Boneyard again. And then we're going to go with a heavy attack. Once the heavy attack is over, I recommend you using the ultimates. Another heavy attack, follow after the ultimate. Then we use the Archer again to summon. Again, we rinse and repeat the same process, following up with the Blast Bones, then Graveyard. Then again, we're going to be able to use the same process, follow through with it, and as you can see, we rinse and repeat. And as for our result with this test dummy, we got a 40,507 DPS in 1 minute and 14 seconds, which is not bad. Now let's talk about where we can actually find this gear that we are wearing. Now for Sergeants, we can actually get it from Way Rescuers 1 or 2, right? They're going to be able to drop the bodies throughout the whole game with the mini boss fights, and then the weapon towards the end with the last boss fight. And then the Quartz Buster, you actually get it from Apocrypha. Now you can either do two things: you can farm it or you can purchase it. Now if you are going to purchase it, I recommend for you to talk to these two characters. They're going to give you daily quests. With these daily quests, you're going to be able to get fortunes at the end, which is a currency in here. And then once you get those fortunes, you can go ahead and purchase it or farm it by entering the archival wings. Now, the final boss is going to be able to drop the piece of the class set that you're running that infinite archive with. So if you're doing it with a Necromancer, you're going to get the Quartz Busters or another class set for a Necromancer, or etc. as well with different other types of classes. You're going to get their particular class set. So I recommend you doing it with a Necromancer, since you have a higher chance of getting more of these pieces, or go to Filer Brax. And with Filer Brax, with the fortunes that you get, you can actually buy it. Now you can get a curated Core Buster set item for 10k fortunes, or you can go ahead and get the unidentified Corpse Buster set for 2,000. Now this is like a mystery box. You might get the same item double, right? So again, it really depends up to you. But as you can see, this is like a crafted set. We have a light piece of armor, we have a medium piece, and a heavy piece. So this is particularly great because you can mix and match on how you want your playstyle to be. If you're going to be able to take out dungeons doing group plays, then I recommend light armor. If you're going to be able to do solo content, I recommend some sort of medium mixed with some heavy armor. And if you're going to be able to take on infinite archives, I recommend definitely going with a full heavy armor set. Now this is going to bring down your spell penetration, but again, it's going to help you with survivability. Now, as well as with the costumes, a lot of people have been asking me, hey, what sort of outfits you're wearing? With this particular Necromancer, I have the Turvoken mask. So this is a monster mask style page that's dropping from Fang Lair. For those that are not aware, Fang Lair is actually a free DLC that we got this month. If you see an arm pack in the Crown Store, right, that means that you can actually farm that mask for that particular arms pack wherever that monster is in that dungeon. So if you're doing Fang Lair, you're going to be able to have a small chance of getting the mask once you defeat the final boss. For our body, we have the Fang Worms. For our shoulder, we have Turvoken Shoulders, which you can get from the Undaunted with your Undaunted keys. They cost 15 Undaunted keys. Take advantage of it right now this week. If not, it's going to be pretty hard for you to get, only to buying it through guild traders, and they're going pretty expensive right now. So for the rest of the body, we actually have Fang Worms for the arms and the legs. As you can see, Fang Worm gauntlets on the hands, and on the waist we have the Fang Worm griddle, which I personally like it. I think it's pretty cool. And as well as the Fang Lair Worm griddle. So you have these two options you can play around with. You can get these style pages by farming that particular dungeon. For the legs, we actually have Deadlands Gladiator. The only reason why I have that is because my character is fully tatted up from the head to the toes, so I want to be able to show that off with the legs. For the feet, we do have the Fang Worm Sabatons, and again, for the staff, we actually have the arm packs of Turvoken staff, which is actually free right now, so take advantage of it. I think it looks pretty cool. And for those wondering why are my hands glowing blue, that's actually an effect that you get by having the full Quartz Buster set. So as soon as you have the 5 pieces, your arms are going to start glowing blue like that, which I think it's a really cool effect. It looks cool on your character. It makes it very necromancy. It makes him look very powerful, and me personally, I think that's really cool. That's also one of the reasons why I needed to make this build with this particular set, because he just looks freaking awesome. So I hope you found this video very helpful. Hopefully you can go out there, farm this set, and be able to test it out. Let me know what you think about this build. Me personally, I tried so many builds so far for the 1-bar Necromancer, and this might not be the most powerfulest build out there, but it is definitely a must try build because it's just very easy to play with. It's very fun to play with. It makes a lot of damage. It has a lot of sustainability. And then on top of that, you can basically solo mostly any sort of content out there. And if you do get in some sort of veteran dungeons, veteran trials, this set will be able to hold itself out. Now, let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know if you have any other better ideas that you want me to try out for a 1-bar build Necromancer. And if you like this video and you found it helpful, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. And I catch you guys on the next one.